So this is half a hog skinless. And actually that fat on the inside that you see that David's going to pull out first, that's actually your leaf lard. People will take that and they'll render that down for lard. Make pies, cook in it. First thing he's doing is he's taking the ham off. He's taking the ham away from the sirloin roast. And he's going to use the handsaw until he reaches the actual meat, and then he'll use his knife so that he doesn't tear the meat. Now David's taking the shoulder off. Now he's going to cut the belly from the loin. Belly's on the left-hand side and loin's on the right. And that's a whole loin. That includes your sirloin, your loin, your rib, and your pork loin end roast. Now he's taking the sirloin roast off. That's what Tim's moving now. Now the loin's on the left-hand side and the rib's on the right. Now David's going to take the pork loin end roast off of the rib. Pork loin end roast actually sits between the rib and the shoulder, so it's a great one to braise, or you can even bake it and slice it. He's just trimming some of the fat that's right next to your tenderloin off, kind of cleaning it up a little bit. David's trimming the far piece of the shank off because it tends to be a little more rough around the edges, and then he took the shank off. The fresh shank is something that you can braise, that he's taken now. You can braise that, or you can brine that and smoke that. That's your traditional ham shank. Great with beans, soups, or you can just gnaw on it a little bit. Now David has your pork belly. This is the pork belly with the spare ribs on. And right now he's cutting what we call a Columbus rib. So that 2-rib piece is what we call a Columbus rib, and that's a fantastic piece to braise in the oven or in the crock pot in liquid until it falls apart, low and slow. Now he's taking the shoulder away. So he cut one Columbus rib off to show us that. And then he's actually going to take the spare rib off of the belly in a minute. But now he's pulled out the pork loin end roast. And he's going to cut the pork loin end roast. He's going to cut the bone just enough. There you go. He's going to cut it just enough so that way he can use the knife and cut through the meat. And that right there gives us 2 country-style pork ribs. And that's another cut that's fantastic to braise. So now he's kind of trimming an extra piece of the meat off of the loin to kind of square up the loin. That's something that you would use either to make sausage, or you can use that as for stew as well if you want a leaner stew. But he's cutting some chops. He cut a thick chop first. Now he's cutting a regular cut loin chop. So the first thing he's going to do is he's going to trim off some of that outside fat. Some people prefer to leave that on there, but most of the time you're going to trim it up a little bit so it looks a little cleaner cut, a little nicer. But can you ever really have too much fat? I don't think so. And now he's going to use the bone scraper here in a second. Looks a little nicer, and you can see the real color of the meat. Now he's going to take the shank. Like I said, he's taking that little piece off the end. Kind of clean it up a little, and then he's taking the shank off of there. Shank off of the ham. So on the left-hand side we have the fresh ham with the shank off, and then we've got the pork chops, regular and thick, loin chops, and then I've also got the fresh pork shank.